The June sun flooded the kitchen of my house on Meadowlark Lane with light. I was dusting the old sideboard, humming a tune I had recently heard on the radio. It was unusually hot in Belmont, and I kept wiping the sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. The air conditioner had been in need of replacement for a long time, but I kept putting off the purchase. It was too expensive for my modest retirement budget. The clock in the living room struck 2. April had promised to come by at 3 to bring the grandchildren for the weekend. I put down the rag, adjusted the knitted shawl on my shoulders, and shuffled into the bathroom. My joints ached from the change in weather, but I was used to ignoring it. 30 years as a nurse at the city hospital had taught me to be resilient. On the table was the shopping list I had made the night before. Abel loved to criticize the contents of my refrigerator, so I tried to stock up on everything I needed before she arrived. At 14, Silas ate enough for 3, and 11-year-old Fallon had become as picky as her mother. I opened the refrigerator and checked again to make sure everything was there. Milk, eggs, cheese, fruit for the grandchildren. There was a baked turkey in the freezer. Abri always complained that she didn't have time to cook because of work. Lately, she had been complaining a lot, especially about me. "Mom, you forgot to turn off the light in the bathroom again. Mom, why can't you learn to use a smartphone like normal people? Mom, you spoil Silas too much. He already has weight problems." Sometimes I felt like I had become a source of constant irritation for her, but I kept quiet. After Garrett's death 5 years ago, Abrielle was my only family, apart from my grandchildren, and family must be cherished, or so I had been taught. The doorbell rang at exactly 3 o'clock. Punctuality was the only thing Abrielle had inherited from her father. "Grandma!" Fallon rushed into the hallway, enveloping me in the scent of children's shampoo and bubble gum. My sweetheart. I hugged my granddaughter, feeling my heart warm. Silas followed, muttered a hello, and immediately buried his face in his phone. At 14, he already considered displays of affection unworthy of a real man. Abriel was the last to enter, carrying a huge bag and several supermarket bags. "Mom, is the air conditioner broken again? I can't breathe in here," she said instead of greeting us as she walked into the house. "Hello, dear," I smiled, ignoring the sarcasm. "Get changed. I've cooked turkey. Hopefully without too much oil? Silas already has a belly and you keep feeding him fatty food." Silas blushed and buried his head even deeper in his phone. I felt sorry for my grandson. Abrielle had always been straightforward, but with age, her directness had turned into bluntness that hurt everyone around her. "Let's go to the kitchen, everything's ready," I said, ignoring my daughter's remark. Over lunch, Abrielle talked about her job at an insurance company. She was a middle manager and constantly complained about her bosses, colleagues, and clients. My grandchildren ate silently, only occasionally answering my questions about school. After dinner, Silas asked permission to go to his room. That's what he called Abri's former room, where a cot now stood for his visits. "First, help your grandmother clear the table," said Abrielle, and I noticed my grandson's shoulders tense. "It's okay, he can go, I'll manage," I said. "That's exactly why he's growing up such a lazy bones," my daughter snapped. "Everyone spoils him." "I'm not lazy," Silas said quietly, but he started clearing the plates anyway. When the table was cleared, my grandchildren went to their rooms. Fallon settled down with a book in the guest room, and Silas shut himself in Abrielle's room. My daughter and I were left alone in the kitchen. "Mom, we need to talk." Abrielle poured herself some tea and sat down across from me. I could tell from her tone that the conversation was going to be unpleasant. She always used that phrase before telling me something I wasn't going to like. "I'm listening, dear." "I think it's time you thought about the future," she said, taking a sip of tea and avoiding my gaze. "This house is too big for you on your own. You can't keep up with the cleaning. You forget to turn off the lights, the stove." "I've never forgotten to turn off the stove, April," I replied gently. "It doesn't matter," she dismissed. "The point is, you're 67, and we need to think about options." "Options?" "Yes, living options. There are excellent nursing homes with medical care. You're a nurse yourself. You should understand how important that is at your age." I felt something cold curl in my chest. "You want to send me to a nursing home?" "Not now, of course," Abriel hastened to clarify. But we need to consider options for the future. I can't constantly worry about something happening to you when I'm at work or with the children. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Right now, yes. But what about in a year? In 5 years? Abby tapped her fingernails on the table impatiently. I can't be torn between work, the kids, and you. I don't have time to drive here every day to check if you're okay. I'm not asking you to do that. But you will! My daughter raised her voice. All old people end up being a burden on their children. I'm just trying to plan ahead. Burden. That word hit me harder than if she had hit me. I looked at Abby and didn't recognize my daughter, the girl I had taught kindness and compassion. I'll never be a burden to you, I said quietly. Don't worry about it. Mom, don't be upset, Abriel softened, noticing the look on my face. I just want you to be safe and looked after. You'll be better off in a nice nursing home than here all alone. I'll think about what you said, I replied, getting up from the table. I'll go check on Fallon. We didn't return to the subject that evening. We watched TV, played board games with our grandchildren, and when everyone went to bed, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, staring into the darkness outside the window. Burden. The word rang in my ears, keeping me awake. Did my only daughter really see me as nothing more than a problem to be gotten rid of? I remembered how Aubrey had learned to walk, how I had read her fairy tales, how I had supported her during her divorce from Dexter, the father of her children. I had given her my whole life, and now she wanted to send me away to live out my days in a government institution. In the morning, when I went down to the kitchen, Aubrey was already making breakfast. An omelet was sizzling on the stove, and the toaster spat out 2 slices of toast. Good morning, Mom, she smiled, as if yesterday's conversation had never happened. Did you sleep well? Not very, I replied honestly. You're back again? I told you need an orthopedic mattress. That one's 100 years old. It's not the mattress, Abby. She sighed as she put the omelet on the plates. If you're still thinking about yesterday, you're wasting your time. I'm just looking out for your future. By calling me a burden? That's not what I meant. You're exaggerating. Abby rolled her eyes, just like she did when she was a teenager. I said that old people can become a burden, that's a fact, but we can plan everything so that doesn't happen. By sending me to a nursing home? Why are you so hung up on words? She slammed the frying pan into the sink. I offered a suggestion, just a suggestion. You don't have to make it into a tragedy. The sleepy grandchildren entered the kitchen and the conversation was interrupted. At breakfast, Abby discussed plans for the day with the children. A trip to the mall, a movie, maybe the park if the weather didn't turn bad. Is Grandma coming with us? Fallon asked, scooping cereal from her bowl. Grandma's back hurts. She'd better rest, Abriel replied for me. Actually, I'd love to go with you, I objected. My back is fine. Really? Fallon beamed. Mom, there'll be a lot of walking, Abriel said emphatically. You'll get tired. I used to be a nurse in the emergency room, honey. Trust me, I know my limits. After breakfast, while Abriel was helping the children get ready, there was a knock at the door. Standing on the doorstep was Winnie Claflin, my neighbor and friend of the past 15 years. Good morning, sunshine, she sang as she entered the house. Vinnie always looked like she was going to a party. Bright lipstick, lush gray hair styled in waves, sparkling jewelry. Oh, I see the whole family is here. Hello, Mrs. Claflin, Abriel said politely, but I noticed her shoulders tense. She had never liked Winnie, finding her too eccentric. Winnie, would you like some coffee? I offered, knowing my friend would never refuse. I'd love some, dear, and maybe a piece of that wonderful cake you're baking. We settled on the porch with our coffee and cake while Abby and the kids got ready to go to the mall. We're leaving, my daughter called from the door. We'll be back for dinner. Okay, have a good day, I replied, waving to my grandchildren. When Abby's car disappeared around the corner, Vinnie turned to me. Well, tell me what happened. You look like you've swallowed a lemon. I sighed. Vinnie always saw right through me. Abriel thinks it's time for me to move into a nursing home. What? Vinnie nearly choked on her coffee. Is she out of her mind? You're in better shape than half our neighbors who are 20 years younger than you. She says she's worried about me, that I might become a burden to her. A burden, Winnie snorted. You know what I think? She's got her eye on your house. How much is it worth now? 500,000? More? I'd never thought about how much the house was worth. Garrett and I bought it for 120,000 in the 80s, and prices in Belmont have gone up a lot since then. I don't know, I replied honestly. But it's not about the money. Abby just doesn't want to take care of me when I get old. You're not that old, sweetie, Vinny chuckled. And you're doing just fine on your own. But your daughter? She shook her head. You know what I would do if I were you. I would sell the house. What? Sell the house, Vinny repeated, spreading butter on a piece of cake. Right now, while you're still of sound mind and memory. I'd get the money, buy myself a smaller apartment, and spend the rest on travel, hobbies, whatever I wanted. And I'd see the look on my daughter's face when she found out. I laughed at the thought. You're joking. Not at all. Vinny looked at me seriously. Meredith, we're not getting any younger. If we don't live for ourselves now, when will we? After they lock us up in a nursing home? No, thank you. I looked at my old house, at the well-kept garden that Garrett had once ruined, at the swing where little Abrielle loved to play. So many memories, so many years. I can't just sell the house. I shook my head. It's my home. A house is walls, dear. Life is what happens here. Vinny tapped her temple. And here, she placed her hand on her heart. Think about it. That evening, when Abrielle and the children returned from the mall, I watched them with a new sense of perspective. My daughter was annoyed. The store didn't have her size of shoes, the movie was disappointing, and the cafe had slow service. Silas went straight to his room, and Fallon tried to show me her new book, but Abri sent her to do her homework for the weekend. This is just awful, she complained, plopping down on the couch next to me. The whole day is ruined. And then there was that traffic jam on the way home. God, I'm so tired. I looked at my daughter and thought that she really was tired. Tired of work, of worries, of life. And I was just another worry for her, another item on her long list of responsibilities. You know, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, I said calmly. What? Abri was scrolling through her phone, not looking at me. About the nursing home, about how I might become a burden to you. Mom, I explained. And I've made a decision, I interrupted, feeling a sudden resolve. You're right, this house is too big for me alone. I'm going to sell it. Abri finally looked up from her phone and stared at me. What? I'm going to sell the house. I'll find something smaller, maybe a one-bedroom apartment. That way you won't have to worry about me and how I'm managing the house. But, Abri blinked in confusion. You can't just sell the house? Why not? It's mine. But we always thought, I thought that someday you'd inherit it? I finished for her. And then you'd sell it and buy something nicer. Or move in here yourself when I'm sent to a nursing home. Abri blushed. That's not fair. You know what I realized today, Abil? That I'm still alive. And I intend to live my life the way I want to, not the way you want me to. I got up and headed for the phone. With trembling fingers, I found the number of Lane Tyndall, the local real estate agent who had once sold the house across the street to our neighbors, in my address book. What are you doing? April approached me, still in disbelief. Calling a real estate agent, I replied, dialing the number. Hello, Lane? This is Meredith Tramble from Meadowlark Lane. It's been a long time. Listen, I'd like to talk to you about selling my house. Lane Tyndall arrived the next day after Abrielle and the children had left for home. It was for the best. I didn't want my daughter interfering with my plans or trying to talk me out of it. The first step toward freedom had to be mine. The real estate agent was a young woman with an energetic gait and a keen eye. She walked around the house, taking notes on her tablet and stopping occasionally to take pictures of the rooms. The house is in good condition, Mrs. Tramble, she said when we returned to the kitchen. The market is pretty active right now, so I think we'll be able to find a buyer quickly, especially considering the neighborhood and the size of the lot. How much do you think it's worth? I asked, feeling a little nervous. It was awkward to talk about money, but I needed to know what I could expect. Lane named a figure that took my breath away. Almost 5 times what Garrett and I had paid in the 80s. Are you sure? I asked incredulously. Absolutely, she nodded. Belmont has become a very popular place for families. Good schools, low crime, close to the city, and your house on Meadowlark Lane is just a dream for a young family. 3 bedrooms, a big yard, a well-kept garden. We could even try to get a little more if you're not in a rush to sell. Actually, I am in a rush, I admitted. The sooner, the better. Lane raised an eyebrow in surprise but said nothing. Professional ethics, probably. Many older people sell their homes to move closer to their children or into retirement homes. The irony of the situation did not escape me. In that case, I suggest we move quickly, she said, taking a folder of documents out of her bag. Let's fill out the necessary forms, and I'll put the house on the market right away. Considering its condition and location, I think we'll start getting offers this week. We spent almost an hour going over the paperwork. I signed the documents and listened to Lane explain the sales process, commissions, and deadlines. When she left, I was alone in the living room surrounded by 40 years of memories. Every corner, every crack in the wall, every scratch on the floor told the story of my life. This was where Garrett proposed to me. This was where we brought home our newborn daughter, Abrielle. This was where I cried when the doctors told us we would never have more children. This was where Garrett died of a heart attack. Suddenly, before he even reached 63. I looked around the room and suddenly realized that I didn't feel the pain I had expected. Instead, I was filled with a strange, almost forgotten feeling. Anticipation. It was as if I was standing on the threshold of something new and unknown. For the first time in many years, I was making a decision thinking only of myself. Not about my daughter, not about my grandchildren, not about what others would say, only about what I wanted. With that thought in mind, I went upstairs and opened the closet in my bedroom. It was time to start sorting through my things. 40 years is a long time to accumulate mountains of useless stuff. I took out a few old boxes and started putting things I definitely wouldn't take with me into them. Old magazines that I had kept for years for some reason, winter sweaters I no longer wore, worn-out novels I had read more than once. While clearing the shelves, I came across an album with photos of our wedding. Garrett in a dark suit, me in a simple white dress that my mother had sewn. We were so young, so full of hope. I flipped through the pages looking at our happy faces, the faces of my long-dead parents, friends from my youth with whom I had long lost touch. One of the photos captured the moment when Garrett gave me my wedding gift, an old Nikon camera. I had always loved photography, but I never took it seriously. I had too many other things to worry about, my job at the hospital, my home, my child. The camera gathered dust on a shelf for years and then disappeared altogether during a cleaning session. This memory made me think. What else had I put off for later? How many desires and dreams had I buried under the weight of everyday responsibilities? Wasn't it time, now that life was giving me a second chance, to finally do what I had always dreamed of? The next day, I continued sorting through things. In the garage, I found boxes of Abrie's toys, her school notebooks, and drawings that I had carefully kept all these years. I set aside a few items that were especially dear to my heart and put the rest in boxes to give to my daughter. Let her decide what to do with her own childhood. In the far corner of the garage stood Garrett's old chest of drawers. After he died, I couldn't bring myself to sort through his things, so I just took the whole chest out of the bedroom and put it in the garage, out of sight. Now it was time to do that too. I opened the top drawer and found neatly folded shirts that still had a faint scent of his cologne. The second drawer contained sweaters and pants. The third held documents, old letters, and notebooks. I carefully sorted through the papers until I came across a folder labeled Important. Inside were our marriage and birth certificates for Abri, house documents, insurance policies, bank statements, and, to my surprise, an envelope with my name on it. I opened it and took out a folded piece of paper. It was Garrett's handwriting, so familiar, so dear to me. "Dear Meredith," he wrote, "if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer here. I know you are a strong woman, but I am afraid that after I am gone, you will withdraw into yourself and devote your entire life to caring for Aubrey and your grandchildren. Don't do that, my love. Live your life to the fullest. Travel. Take pictures of the world like you've always dreamed of doing. Don't let our daughter dictate how you live your life. She loves you, but she has her own path to follow, and you must have yours. Know that I will always love you wherever I am. Your Garrett. Tears streamed down my cheeks, dripping onto the paper. He knew me so well, better than I knew myself. How I wished he were here now to support me in my decision. Wiping away my tears, I carefully folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I placed the envelope, along with other important documents, in the bag I was going to take with me. I decided to donate the rest of Garrett's things to a charity at the local church. They always collected clothes for the poor. The next few days were spent in a flurry of activity. I sorted through his things, threw away what I didn't need, and packed what I was going to take with me. I called Aubrey only once, telling her I was busy cleaning and not to worry if she couldn't get through. My daughter, immersed in her own problems, replied distractedly that she would call over the weekend. On the third day after the realtor's visit, the phone rang. It was Lane with news. "Mrs. Tramble, I have great news," she said excitedly. "We already have several offers. One of them is even higher than our asking price. It's a family of 3 with a school-aged child. They fell in love with the house at first sight and are ready to put down a deposit today." I felt my heart beat faster. Everything was happening so fast. "So soon?" was all I could say. "Yes, it's not usual, but houses like yours are in high demand right now. The buyers are ready to get a mortgage in the next few days and close the deal as soon as possible. Are you still interested in selling quickly?" I took a deep breath. The moment of truth had come sooner than I expected. "Yes," I replied firmly. "I want to sell the house." "Great," said Lane. "Then I'll contact the buyers and schedule an appointment to sign the preliminary contract. Have you found a new place to live yet?" That question caught me off guard. In the rush of sorting through my belongings, I had somehow forgotten the most important thing. I needed somewhere to live after the house was sold. "Not yet," I admitted. "But I'd like to find a small apartment, maybe closer to the city center." "I have a few options in mind," said Lane. "Nothing fancy, but clean, cozy apartments in good neighborhoods. Would you like me to send you the information?" "Yes, please." "And one more thing, Mrs. Tramble," she added. "The buyers would like to move in as soon as possible. They're asking if it would be possible within 2 to 3 weeks." 2 to 3 weeks. So little time to say goodbye to the house where I had lived almost my entire life. "I'll do my best," I replied. After talking to Lane, I sat down at the computer I had bought a few years ago at Aubrey's insistence. My daughter thought I should learn modern technology so I wouldn't fall behind. I rarely used it, mostly to correspond with a few friends who had moved away, and sometimes to read the news. But now the computer came in handy. I opened a search engine and typed in Belmont photography courses. To my surprise, there were several photography schools in the city. One of them, Objective, was located near the center and offered courses for beginners. Classes were held twice a week in the evenings and included both theory lectures and practical sessions with trips to the countryside. The cost was quite reasonable, especially considering the amount I was supposed to receive for the house. Without hesitation, I called the number listed on the website and signed up for a course starting in 2 weeks. Then I looked through the apartments Lane had sent me again and chose the 2 I liked best. One in an old brick building overlooking the city park, the other in a modern complex with an elevator and security. I called Lane and arranged to view both apartments the next day. Then I grabbed another box and went up to the attic, the last place in the house that needed to be sorted out. The attic was filled with boxes of Christmas decorations, old suitcases, skis that no one had used in years, and other items that Garrett and I couldn't bring ourselves to throw away, but didn't use either. I methodically sorted through the items, putting what could be thrown away into trash bags, and setting aside the few things I wanted to keep. In one of the boxes, I found old photo albums, more than 20 of them, filled with pictures I had taken over the years. Here was April taking her first steps. Here were Garrett and I on a trip to the lake. Here was our first house before we moved to Belmont. I had forgotten how much I used to take pictures before life got too busy for hobbies. I went downstairs and put the albums on the coffee table in the living room. Let this be my legacy to April. Not a house, not money, but memories. Real, genuine moments of our lives captured on film. The next day, I met Lane to look at apartments. The first one, in an old brick building, was dark and too noisy. The windows faced a busy street, but I liked the second one at first sight. It was a bright one-room apartment on the fourth floor of a modern building. It had large windows, a small balcony, a new kitchen, and importantly for my joints, an elevator. The apartment was smaller than I was used to, but more than enough for one person. "Take it, you won't regret it," Lane said, noticing my reaction. "The neighborhood is great. There's a park nearby, a supermarket 2 blocks away, and a bus stop 5 minutes walk away. And the neighbors are mostly middle-aged, quiet, working people." "I agree," I nodded. "When can I move in?" "The apartment is available now. You can sign the lease today." We returned to Lane's office, where I signed the lease and paid the first month's rent and security deposit. Now I had a new roof over my head and could sell my old house with a clear conscience. The next day, I met with the buyers to sign a preliminary contract. They were a young couple with an 8-year-old son. They seemed like nice people, and I was glad that my house would go to a family with a child. The son, a blond boy with lively eyes, reminded me of Silas at that age, before he became a withdrawn teenager. After signing all the documents and receiving the deposit, I returned home and sat down on the sofa in the living room. It was done. In 2 weeks, this house would belong to other people, and I would start a new chapter in my life. Strangely, instead of sadness, I felt only relief and excitement about the unknown. I took out my phone and dialed Vinny's number. She had to be the first to know about my decision. "Hi, sweetie," my friend answered in her cheerful voice. "How are you?" "I'm selling the house," I said without preamble, "and I've already found an apartment downtown." There was silence on the other end of the line, then laughter. "Meredith Tramble!" Vinny exclaimed. "You never cease to amaze me. I thought you'd spend months thinking and doubting, but you've already made up your mind. Way to go, girl! I'm proud of you." "Thanks," I smiled, "but that's not all. I signed up for photography classes." "Photography?" Vinny asked. "I didn't know you were interested in that." "A long time ago," I said, remembering Garrett's wedding gift and his last letter. "It's time to make up for lost time." In the days that followed, I prepared for the move. I hired movers, bought boxes to pack the things I was taking with me, and arranged with the local church to donate furniture and clothing to charity. With each passing day, the house became emptier and less mine. A week before the official closing of the sale, I had already moved most of my belongings to my new apartment. It was unusually small, and I had to cut down on my possessions considerably, but every item I left behind was truly necessary or dear to my heart. On the day the final documents were to be signed, I woke up early. There were very few of my things left in the house. The bed I slept on, some dishes in the kitchen, and a few days' worth of clothes. After lunch, I was supposed to meet Lane and the buyers at the notary's office and then hand over the keys to the new owners. I walked around the empty rooms, saying goodbye to every corner, every memory. This is where Abby's crib used to be. This is where Garrett surprised me on our 20th wedding anniversary. This is where I cried when I found out about my mother's death. So much life, so many moments, and all of them would remain here, within these walls when I left. But I didn't feel sad. Instead, I was filled with a strange sense of freedom and anticipation. It was as if I was shedding a heavy burden that I had been carrying for too long. At the appointed time, I arrived at the notary's office. Lane was already there, as was a young couple with a child, my buyers. We exchanged polite greetings and the notary began the procedure. I signed the documents one by one, officially transferring ownership of the house where I had lived for 40 years. When everything was finished, I received a check for an amount that seemed unrealistically large to me and handed the keys to the new owners. The boy looked at me curiously. "Are there any ghosts in the house?" he asked suddenly. "No," I smiled. "Only good memories." His mother smiled shyly and took her son by the hand. "We'll take good care of your house, Mrs. Tramble." "It's your house now," I replied, "and I hope you'll be happy there." Leaving the notary's office, I took a deep breath. That's it. It's done. The house is sold, the money has been received, and a new apartment is waiting for me. And in a week, my photography classes begin. I got into a taxi and gave the driver the address of my new apartment. When the car started moving, I didn't turn around to take one last look at the past. Instead, I looked ahead, to where my new life was beginning. The first week in my new apartment was spent in a flurry of activity. I arranged my things in the closets, hung curtains, and got used to the new kitchen. The space was much smaller than in my old house, but surprisingly cozy. The large windows let in a lot of light, and the small balcony overlooked the city park. In the mornings, I drank coffee while watching joggers on the paths and mothers with strollers on the benches. Life was bustling around me, and I was gradually becoming a part of it. I waited for April's call every day, but the phone remained silent. My daughter was busy with work and children, and I was in no hurry to tell her about the move. Let everything take its course. Sooner or later, she would find out, but by then, I would be firmly settled in my new place. On Thursday, my photography classes began. The Objective School was located in an old brick building that had been converted into creative studios. I arrived early, feeling nervous like a schoolgirl before her first lesson. The last time I had learned anything new, apart from compulsory refresher courses for nurses, was 20 years ago. The classroom gradually filled with people of all ages. There were very young students, middle-aged people, and even a few people older than me. I chose a seat in the middle row and took out my notebook. "May I sit down?" a pleasant male voice asked nearby. I looked up and saw a tall, gray-haired man with a friendly smile. "Of course," I nodded, moving my bag. "Thank you. My name is Quentin Hamish," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Meredith Tramble," I replied, shaking his hand. "Is this your first photography class?" Quentin asked. "Yes, and you?" "Oh, I'm an old hand at this," he smiled. "I've been taking pictures for 30 years, but technology is always changing and you have to keep your creative eye fresh. So I decided to sign up for a class." Our conversation was interrupted by the instructor entering the classroom. She was a short woman of about 45 with short hair and lively eyes. She introduced herself as Heather Oren, a professional photographer with 20 years of experience and a photography teacher. "Good evening, everyone," she began energetically. "I'm glad to see both familiar and new faces. Our course, Basics of Photography, is designed to last 8 weeks. During this time, you will learn not just how to press the button on a camera, but how to see the world through a lens, understand light, composition, and camera settings. And most importantly, you will learn to find your own unique perspective on the world around you." Heather talked about the structure of the course, showed us the work of her previous students, and explained what equipment we would need. I didn't have a camera, so I made a mental note to buy one in the next few days. After the introductory lecture, we got to know each other. Everyone told a little bit about themselves and why they decided to take up photography. When it was my turn, I was a little flustered. "My name is Meredith Tramble. I'm 67 years old," I began. "I'm a retired nurse. I was into photography when I was younger, but then life got busy. Work, family, home. Recently, I decided to start a new chapter in my life and revisit an old hobby." "That's a great story, Meredith," Heather smiled. "It's never too late to return to something you love. Do you already have a camera?" "Not yet," I admitted. "But I plan to buy one in the next few days." "Don't rush into buying one," advised the teacher. "In the next class, we'll talk about choosing a camera. In the meantime, you can use your smartphone. Modern phones have excellent cameras that are perfectly suitable for beginners." After class, Quentin suggested we stop by a small cafe across from the photography school. We were joined by 2 other women from the class, Rhoda Swig, a librarian in her 60s, and Beatrice Christian, a recently retired elementary school teacher. Over a cup of tea, we discussed our expectations for the course and shared our life stories. "How long have you been in Belmont?" Rhoda asked me. "Almost 40 years," I replied. "I recently moved downtown, but before that I lived in the Green Valley area." "Green Valley?" Beatrice perked up. "My niece bought a house there last week." "On Meadowlark Lane. It's so beautiful with a big garden." I froze with my cup at my lips. Could this be the family I sold the house to? "Meadowlark Lane, you say?" I asked cautiously. "Do you remember the house number?" "I think it was 23. Beatrice frowned, trying to remember. "Yes, that's right, 23. They were so happy with their purchase. The previous owner, an elderly woman, was selling it urgently, below market value." "Not that much below," I blurted out involuntarily. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me in surprise. "Do you know that house?" asked Rhoda. I put my cup on the table and smiled. I'm the elderly woman who sold it. You. Beatrice's eyes widened. What a coincidence! Carolyn is my niece. She loves the house. She says it has good energy. I'm glad to hear that, I replied sincerely. I lived a happy life there. I hope your niece and her family will be just as happy. But why did you decide to sell such a beautiful house? Rhoda asked curiously. I didn't want to go into details about my relationship with Aubrey, so I replied evasively. It became too big for me to live in alone. Besides, I've always dreamed of living closer to the center, walking to shops, museums, and parks. At my age, you start to appreciate time and opportunities in a new way. I understand you perfectly, Quentin nodded. After my wife died, I also sold our big house and moved to an apartment near the river. It was the best decision of my life. No worries about the lawn, the roof, or the pipes. Just freedom and new experiences. The conversation smoothly moved on to other topics, but I noticed Beatrice sneakily take out her phone and send a message to someone, probably her niece, telling her about her meeting with the former owner of the house. Well, now the rumors will definitely start spreading. Belmont is a small town where everyone is connected in one way or another. Sooner or later, the news would reach Avril. In the next class, Heather talked about choosing a camera for beginners. After the lecture, I approached her for advice, and she recommended several models in the mid-price range. Quentin overheard our conversation and suggested we go to a camera store together. I'm running out of film anyway, he said. And I can explain what to look for when buying a camera better than any salesperson. I agreed. And on Saturday, we met in the city center. Quentin turned out to be a real expert in photography. He patiently explained the differences between models, helped me compare features, and let me hold different cameras to see which one felt most comfortable in my hand. In the end, I settled on a medium-sized SLR camera with a good zoom lens. Great choice for a beginner, Quentin approved. It's fairly easy to use, but has room for growth. Once you've mastered the basics, you can buy different lenses for different tasks. After the store, we went to a cafe, and Quentin invited me to join a photo walk he was organizing the next day. Several people from our group have already agreed, he said. We're going to the national park to practice landscape photography. It's a great chance to try out your new camera. I gladly accepted the invitation. It had been a long time since I had been out of the city, especially in the company of like-minded people. On Sunday morning, we met in the parking lot of the photography school. Besides Quentin, there were also Rhoda, Beatrice, and two other students from our course, a young couple named Zach and Mia. Quentin drove the minivan, which comfortably accommodated all of us, and we set off for the park, located an hour's drive from the city. It was a sunny day, perfect for photography. We wandered along forest paths, stopped at picturesque glades, and climbed to a viewpoint overlooking the lake. Quentin and the more experienced photographers gave advice to the beginners, showing them how to set up their cameras, choose angles, and work with light and shadow. I felt unexpectedly happy, wandering among the trees with my camera, catching sunbeams on the water, trying to capture a bird in flight or a dewdrop on a leaf. The world looked different through the lens, brighter, more detailed, more meaningful. It was as if I was learning to see beauty in the little things I hadn't noticed before. At lunchtime, we had a picnic on the shore of the lake. Everyone brought something to share. Beatrice baked a blueberry pie, Rhoda made sandwiches, and Zach and Mia brought fruit and homemade lemonade. Unaware of the tradition, I didn't bring anything, but Quentin reassured me, saying that I could bring something next time. Will there be a next time? I smiled. Of course, he winked. We try to get out every weekend, sometimes to the park, sometimes to the city for street photography, sometimes to the coast. Photography is practice, practice, and more practice. After lunch, we continued shooting, and as evening approached, we headed back to the city. I returned home tired but filled with impressions and with a memory card full of new photos. I turned on my computer, downloaded the pictures, and began looking through them one by one. Most of them weren't very good, blurry, not sharp enough, or poorly composed, but a few frames made me smile with pride. I especially liked the shot of an old tree by the lake, lit by the setting sun. Looking at that photo, I suddenly thought of Garrett. How proud he would be of me now. I was finally doing what I had always dreamed of, but never found the time to do. Only then did I notice that my phone was flashing red, missed calls. I picked it up and saw 15 calls from Abriel and 3 voicemails. Apparently, the rumors had reached her faster than I expected. I pressed play on the first message and heard my daughter's agitated voice. Mom, is it true that you sold the house? Daisy just called and said that new tenants have moved into the house on Meadowlark Lane. Call me back right away. The second message was recorded an hour later. Mom, where are you? I've been calling you all day. I went to your house and there are people living there. They said they bought the house a week ago. What's going on? Where are you? The third message, left just half an hour ago, sounded downright panicked. Mom, I'm really worried. If you don't call me back within the next hour, I'm going to call the police. Please let me know that you're okay. I sighed and dialed my daughter's number. She answered after the first ring. Mom, finally! Where are you? What's going on? Hello, Abri, I replied calmly. I'm fine. I did sell the house and moved to an apartment in the city center. You, what? My daughter's voice was filled with disbelief. And you didn't think to tell me? I was going to, but you were busy, and I wanted to settle into my new place first. I can't believe it, Abri exclaimed. You sold the house, our family home, and didn't even consult me? Should I have? I asked gently. The house belonged to me, Abri, and the decision was mine. But it's our house. It's where we grew up. All our memories are there. How could you do that? My memories will stay with me wherever I live, I replied, and the house now belongs to a nice young family with a child. I think your father would have liked that. Don't bring Dad into this. He would never have approved of such an irresponsible act. Where are you going to go now? Where are you going to live? I already told you. In an apartment in the center. It's small but comfortable. It has a balcony and a view of the park. An apartment. Abri's voice sounded incredulous. You've never lived in an apartment. You don't even know what it's like to live in a multifamily building with neighbors behind the walls without a garden. You can learn anything, I replied calmly. For example, today I learned how to photograph nature. By the way, I signed up for photography classes. Photography? Abriel seemed increasingly confused. Mom, what's going on with you? You're selling the house, moving into an apartment, signing up for some classes? Is this all because of that conversation? Because I mentioned the nursing home? Not only that, I replied honestly, but that conversation was the last straw. You know, Abri, you were right about one thing. It was time for me to think about the future, and I did. I sold the house that was too big for me, bought a cozy apartment, signed up for the classes I dreamed of taking my whole life, and even made new friends. Friends? My daughter echoed. What friends? People from my photography class. Today we went to a national park and took pictures of nature. It was really interesting. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost physically feel Abri trying to process everything I had told her. I don't understand, she finally said. Why didn't you consult with me? Why didn't you tell me about your plans? We could have discussed everything and found another solution. What other solution, Abri? I asked. You wanted me to sell the house and move into a nursing home so I wouldn't be a burden to you. I sold the house and moved into an apartment so I could live on my own and do what I enjoy. The only difference is that I made the decision myself, not you for me. I never said you had to move into a nursing home right now, my daughter exclaimed. I just wanted us to think about the future. And I thought about it, I interrupted gently. And I did what I think is right for me. Mom, Abri's voice trembled. Do you even understand how this looks? It's as if you're offended and have decided to take revenge on me by depriving me of my inheritance. The accusation caught me off guard. Did Abri really think it was all about the money? Honey, I said as calmly as I could, I didn't take away your inheritance. The money from the sale of the house is still there. I spent some of it on an apartment and courses, but most of it is in the bank. When the time comes, you and your grandchildren will get it all. It's not about the money, Abrielle exclaimed, but I heard a note of relief in her voice. It's about you making such an important decision without consulting me. I'm your daughter, your family. We should make these decisions together. No, Abri, I said firmly. I love you. You're my daughter, but I'm an adult, and I have the right to make my own decisions, just like you make decisions about your life without consulting me. That's different, she insisted stubbornly. Why? Because I'm older? Because you think I'm not capable of deciding how to live my life? No, but Abriel hesitated. I'm just worried about you. You've lived in this house your whole life, and now you've suddenly decided to change everything. It's not like you. Maybe you just don't know me as well as you think you do, I replied gently. People change, Aubrey, even at my age. There was silence again on the line. I could hear my daughter breathing heavily, imagining her frowning as she pondered my words. I want to see your new apartment, she finally said, to make sure you're okay. Of course, I agreed. Come over next weekend. I'll cook dinner, show you around, tell you about my classes. You can bring the kids if you want. It's a little cramped, but there's always room for the grandchildren. Okay, Abriel replied dryly. Saturday at 2. And Mom, next time, please let me know about such serious decisions in advance. I almost lost my mind when I found out you sold the house. I'll try, I promised, though I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. My new life was just beginning, and I didn't yet know where it would take me. After talking to my daughter, I returned to my computer and continued looking through the photos from today's trip. One of them caught my eye, a panoramic view of a lake with mountains on the horizon. The light, the composition, the mood, everything was perfect. I decided to print out the photo and hang it on the wall in my new apartment. It would be the first trophy of my new life. In the evening, lying in bed, I thought about the day, about the trip to the park, about new friends, about the conversation with my daughter. It was a strange feeling, as if I had finally woken up after a long sleep. It was as if I had been living someone else's life, and now, for the first time, I had begun to write my own. With that thought, I fell asleep, clutching my new camera tightly in my hand, which I had placed next to my pillow like a precious treasure. In the morning, I was awakened by the ringing of the phone. It was Vinny, who had somehow found out the news too. Meredith Tramble, she exclaimed in her ringing voice. You sold the house and didn't tell me? I should have heard about it from Betty on Pine Street. I'm sorry, Vinny, I smiled, imagining my friend's indignant face. It all happened so fast. I wanted to invite you to a housewarming party when I got settled in. So that's why you didn't answer the door. I thought you were mad at me for that advice. On the contrary, I followed your advice. And you know what? It was the best decision of my life. Tell me, demanded Vinny. I want all the details. Where do you live? How did your princess daughter react? And what are you doing now that you're free? I told Vinny about my new apartment, my photography classes, yesterday's trip to the park, and my conversation with Abriel. My friend listened, occasionally interjecting with approving exclamations. I'm so proud of you, dear, she said when I finished my story. Not everyone has the courage to change everything at our age. Most people just go with the flow until the end. But you're doing great. Thank you, Vinny, I said sincerely. Your support means a lot to me. So when can I see your new place? She asked. And meet your new photographer friends? Especially that Quentin you were raving about. I wasn't raving. I started, but stopped, realizing that Vinny was teasing me. April is coming with the kids next Saturday. Maybe you'd like to come over on Sunday? I'll make your favorite blueberry pie. I'd love to, Vinny agreed. And don't forget to show me your photos. I want to see what you've learned. After talking to Vinny, I got dressed and went out onto the balcony with a cup of coffee. It was a clear morning, and the first joggers and dog walkers were already out in the park. Life was bustling, and I was part of it. Not just an observer, but an active participant. I thought about Aubrey's upcoming visit. Of course, it wouldn't be easy to explain my decision to her in a way that she would truly understand. But, in the end, it was my life, and I had the right to live it the way I saw fit, even if someone disagreed with that. Saturday morning was sunny and warm. I got up early to prepare lunch for Abriel and my grandchildren. I wanted to make a good impression and show that I was doing well on my own. I tidied up the apartment, arranged flowers in vases, printed out some of my best photos, and hung them on the wall in the living room. My new apartment no longer felt like a stranger's place. In the 2 weeks I had lived there, I had made every corner my own, arranged the furniture to my liking, and hung the curtains I had brought from my old house. The small space looked cozy and bright. The kitchen, though tiny compared to my previous one, was functional. By noon, everything was ready. The roast was simmering in the oven, the salad was cooling in the refrigerator, and the apple pie I had baked early in the morning was giving off the aroma of cinnamon and vanilla. I put on my best dress, dark blue with a small floral pattern that Garrett always called royal. I did my hair and even put on some light makeup, which I hadn't done often in recent years. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I answered and heard April's voice. Mom, it's us. Which button is the doorbell? The third one on the right, I replied. Come up to the fourth floor, apartment 412. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw Abri and both of my grandsons, Silas and Fallon. My daughter looked tense, her lips pressed tightly together and her eyes alert. My grandsons, on the other hand, seemed intrigued. Grandma! Fallon threw her arms around my neck. You have a new house. It's an apartment, sweetheart. I smiled, hugging my granddaughter. Come in, don't stand in the doorway. Silas nodded awkwardly, muttered hello, and walked into the living room, looking around with teenage indifference that I knew hid curiosity. Hi, Mom, Abriel said dryly, following behind. Interesting place. Thank you, I replied, deciding to ignore her tone. I really like it here. Make yourselves comfortable, dinner is almost ready. Abril slowly walked around the apartment, looking at the furnishings, peeking into the kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom. Her face remained impassive, but I could sense that she was looking for flaws, confirmation that she was right. It's pretty cramped, she finally said, returning to the living room. And noisy, I bet? The windows faced the street. The park, I corrected her. And I like watching life go by. Silence can be too quiet sometimes. Grandma, what are these photos? Fallon asked, looking at the pictures on the wall. I took them, dear, in the photography class I told you about. You? Her granddaughter exclaimed in surprise. By yourself? They're so beautiful. Thank you, I said, stroking her head. If you want, I can show you how to use the camera after lunch. Fallon nodded energetically, and Silas, who had been pretending not to listen, looked up from his phone. What kind of camera do you have, Grandma? I told him the make and model. My grandson's eyes widened. Really? That's a professional SLR. Where did you learn to use it? At a class, I repeated, delighted by his interest. And with the help of friends from the photography club. We have a great teacher, Heather. And Quentin, he's been taking pictures for 30 years and is very helpful to beginners. Quentin? Abri asked, raising an eyebrow. Who's that? A friend from the photography class, I replied simply. He takes us on photo walks on the weekends. He's a very interesting man, a former architect. Abril hummed but said nothing. I invited everyone to the table, and the conversation shifted to neutral topics: school, the weather, a new movie the grandchildren had seen. I told them about the class, my first successes in photography, and how convenient it was to live in the city center, close to shops and a park. The atmosphere gradually warmed up, and even Abri began to relax. She praised the roast, and Fallon ate 2 pieces of apple pie, declaring it the most delicious in the world. After lunch, the children went to explore the balcony, and my daughter and I remained at the table. So, Abriel began, twirling her teacup in her hands. You really sold the house? Yes, I nodded. The papers are signed, the money has been received, the new owners have already moved in. And you're not going back? No, of course not. I live here. Abri took a deep breath as if gathering her strength. Mom, I have something to tell you. I was planning to move into our house with the kids in a few years. I looked at her in surprise. Really? You never mentioned that. I thought it was obvious, Abriel shrugged. The house is big, the neighborhood is nice, and there are great schools nearby. Dexter and I are divorced, and I thought that when the kids were older, we could all live there together. You, me, Silas, and Fallon. A family. But you talked about a nursing home, I reminded her. That was a long way off, Abel exclaimed. When you start having trouble getting around on your own, 10, 15 years from now maybe. Until then, we could live together. I'd help you with the house, you'd help with the kids. I was silent, Thinking about her words, Aubrey had never shared such plans before. All I had heard from her in recent years were complaints about her cramped apartment, the high rent, how difficult it was to balance work and raising children. Why didn't you tell me about this before? I asked. I thought you knew, Abrielle said, lowering her eyes. And besides, I didn't want to pressure you. It was your house, your decision. But then why did you talk about me being a burden? About a nursing home? That's not what I meant, she protested heatedly. Well, not exactly. I just wanted us to discuss the future, our future together. But you took it the wrong way and did this. She gestured around the apartment. I looked closely at my daughter, trying to understand if she was being sincere. I saw genuine concern in her eyes, but also something else. Calculation, resentment, disappointment. You know, Aubrey, I began slowly. Even if you had told me about your plans, I'm not sure I would have agreed to live together. We're very different. We have different outlooks on life, different habits, different expectations. You'd want me to help with the kids, and I want to enjoy my freedom while I can. Freedom from what? From your family? Aubrey's voice sounded hurt. Not from my family, but from obligations, I tried to explain. I've spent my whole life living for others. For my parents. For your father. For you. Don't get me wrong. I don't regret anything. But now that I finally have the chance to live for myself, I want to take it. And that's why you sold the house, Abrielle said bitterly. The house where we could have all lived together. I sold the house because it was too big for me alone, I explained patiently. And because I wanted to start a new chapter in my life, without resentment or reproach. Abrielle looked at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. Maybe she had never seen me as an individual with my own desires and dreams, but only as a mother who should always be there to help. So it's over, she finally said. The house is sold and we'll never live together. The house is sold, I agreed. But we're still family, Aubrey. We'll just live our own lives as we should. You'll raise your children and build your career, and I'll learn photography and enjoy new opportunities. And new friends, she added pointedly. That Quentin, for example. I smiled, not taking the bait. Yes, and new friends too. At my age, it's rare to find like-minded people. Aubrey wanted to say something, but at that moment, Fallon burst into the room. Grandma, you promised to show me how to use the camera. Of course, sweetie, I said, getting up from the table, glad for the opportunity to interrupt the unpleasant conversation. I'll get the camera right now. The rest of the day passed relatively peacefully. I showed my grandchildren how to use the camera and talked about composition, lighting, and angles. Even Silas showed interest, forgetting his usual indifference for a while. We went to the park and had a little photo shoot. Abrielle kept her distance, watching us with a stony face. When it was time to say goodbye, Fallon hugged me tightly. I like your new apartment, Grandma, and the photos. Can I come visit you next weekend? Will you teach me some more? Of course, sweetheart, I stroked her head. Come whenever you want. You're always welcome here. Silas shook my hand awkwardly, but I saw a new interest in his eyes. Thanks for the lesson, Grandma. I'll download the photo editing app you mentioned. Abrielle said goodbye curtly, but without overt hostility. I hugged her goodbye, and she didn't pull away, which was progress. When they left, I cleared the table, washed the dishes, and sat down in the armchair by the window, looking out at the evening park. The visit had gone better than I expected, but Abrielle's words about her plans for the house kept running through my mind. The phone rang. It was Quentin, reminding me about tomorrow's photo outing to the botanical garden. How did the meeting with your daughter go? He asked after greeting me. Better than I feared. Worse than I hoped, I replied honestly. The grandchildren are thrilled with the camera, but Aubrey, it turns out she was planning to move into my house with her children in a few years. And live with you under the same roof? Quentin sounded surprised. These days, 3 generations under one roof is rare, especially when it comes to adults with established habits. That's what I think, I sighed. But Abrielle thinks I betrayed the family by selling the house. as if bricks and tiles are more important than people. Give her time, Quentin advised. She needs to get used to the idea that her mother is an independent person with her own plans and desires. In the morning, I was awakened by the insistent ringing of the doorbell. Glancing at the clock, I saw that it was only 8 in the morning, too early for visitors. Throwing on my robe, I went to the door and asked, "Who is it?" "It's me, open up," I heard Abriel's voice. Surprised, I opened the door. My daughter was standing there alone without the children. Her face looked haggard as if she hadn't slept all night. "Abriel? What's wrong?" I asked, alarmed. "Are the children all right?" "The children are fine," she said, slipping past me into the apartment. "Mom, we need to talk. We need to talk seriously." "Okay." I closed the door and followed her into the living room. "Would you like some coffee first?" "No, thank you." Abby sat down on the sofa, clenching her hands so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Mom, I've been thinking all night. About you, about the house, about everything. And I realized I need to be honest with you." I sat down silently across from her, waiting for her to continue. "I was really counting on the house," she began, looking me straight in the eye. "Not just as a place where we could live together, but as financial support. You see, I have problems, serious money problems." "What?" I was stunned. Abby had never mentioned financial difficulties. "But you have a good job, a decent salary, and huge debts," she said with a bitter smile. "The student loan I still haven't paid off. The mortgage I had to take out after the divorce so I could have a place to live with the kids. Medical bills. Remember when Silas broke his arm last year? Insurance only covered part of it. And then there's the credit cards. I've never been good at saving money, you know. I really knew that. Abby always loved nice things, restaurants, traveling. Even after the divorce, when she had to raise her children alone, she didn't deny herself any pleasures. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly. "I would have helped." "Pride, I guess," she shrugged. "I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle it. And then I was counting on inheriting a house in a few years. I would sell it or refinance it, pay off the debts, and start with a clean slate." "And now you don't have a home," I finished for her. "Yes." Abriel lowered her eyes. "Now I don't have a home. And I don't know what to do. The bank is threatening to take the apartment away if I don't pay off the mortgage within a week. I'm afraid my children and I will end up on the street." "A week?" I couldn't believe it. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you wait until the last minute?" "I hoped I could manage on my own." She lowered her head. "I looked for a part-time job, tried to negotiate a debt restructuring with the bank, but nothing worked out. And then I found out that you sold the house and I had no choice." I looked at my daughter, not knowing what to feel. Shock at her confession? Resentment that she saw me only as a source of money? Pity for her and my grandchildren, who were now in this situation. "How much do you owe?" I finally asked. Abriel named a sum that took my breath away. Almost a third of the money from selling the house, minus what I had spent on the apartment and courses. "And you thought I would just give you the house?" I asked, trying to understand her logic. "You won't give it to me, but you'll leave it to me in your will," she replied quietly. "And maybe you'll move into a nursing home where professionals will take care of you instead of me." I know it sounds awful. I'm not proud of myself, Mom, but I'm desperate. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking down at the park below. People were walking, running, walking their dogs, unaware of the drama unfolding in the apartment above them. My own daughter had admitted that she wanted to send me to a nursing home, not out of concern for me, but to take possession of the house and solve her financial problems. It hurt. "Mom," Abby came over and stood next to me. "I know I did a terrible thing, and I'm not asking you to forgive me, but I am asking for your help. Not for me, but for Silas and Fallon. They are not responsible for my mistakes." I looked at my daughter. There were tears in her eyes, sincere tears of remorse and fear. Despite everything, she was still my child, flesh of my flesh. And my grandchildren, they really weren't to blame for their mother's financial problems. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "I need time, Abriel. What you've told me, It's too much. I understand, she nodded, wiping away her tears. Of course, think about it, but please don't take too long. I only have a week left. 7 days. I had 7 days to decide whether to help my daughter, who saw me as nothing more than a wallet, or let her and my grandchildren end up homeless. What a terrible choice. I'll call you, I said, feeling exhausted from the short conversation. Now, I'm sorry, I have to get ready. I have a photo walk with my group. Of course, Abrielle nodded, heading for the door. Thank you for listening, and forgive me if you can. When she left, I sank into a chair, feeling my hands shake. Everything I had built over the past few weeks, my new life, my freedom, my plans, could all come crashing down because of my daughter's irresponsibility. I spent the next few days thinking. I talked to a financial advisor, a lawyer, and discussed the situation with Vinny and Quentin. Quentin advised me not to rush into a decision and to set clear conditions if I did decide to help. Vinny was categorically against helping Abri financially, believing that her daughter should take responsibility for her own mistakes. On the 6th day, I made my decision. I called Abri and asked her to come over. She arrived an hour later, nervous and tense. I've been thinking a lot, I began when we sat down in the living room. And I'm willing to help, but on certain conditions. What conditions? Abri asked cautiously. First, I won't give you the money as a gift, but as a loan that you will repay in small monthly installments. Second, you'll have to make a plan to pay off all your debts and stick to it. Third, we'll open a college fund for Silas and Fallon, and I'll put a certain amount in every month, and you'll put in as much as you can. Abrielle looked at me with a mixture of relief and confusion. That's very generous of you, Mom, but I'm not sure I'll be able to pay you back anytime soon. That's why we're going to make a realistic plan, I said firmly. I'm not asking you to pay back the entire amount right away, but I want you to learn how to be responsible with money, for yourself and for the children. I agree. Abrielle nodded after a pause. All conditions, and thank you, Mom. I know I don't deserve your help after everything I've said and done. You're my daughter, I replied simply, and you always will be, no matter what. We agreed to meet with my financial advisor the next day to draw up the paperwork and make a plan. When Abri left, I felt a strange sense of relief. The decision had been made, and it felt right. I was helping my daughter and grandchildren, but I wasn't giving up my new life. That evening, Quentin called to see how my meeting with Abrielle had gone. I've decided to help her, I said, but on my terms. I hope it will teach her to be more responsible. You did the right thing, he said approvingly. And you know what? I'm proud of you. Not everyone could find the right balance between helping loved ones and maintaining their own freedom. His words warmed my heart. For the first time in many days, I felt that I was doing the right thing, that I had found a balance between my obligations to my family and my loyalty to myself. On the 7th day, April and I met with a financial advisor. We signed all the necessary documents, drew up a detailed debt repayment plan, and opened an education fund for our grandchildren. My daughter looked both depressed and relieved. She had avoided financial disaster, but at the cost of admitting her irresponsibility and agreeing to strict control over her spending. Thank you, Mom, she said as we left the advisor's office. I know you could have just turned your back on me after everything I said, but you didn't. And I'll try to be better. For you, for the children, for myself. I believe in you, I replied, hugging my daughter. And I'll always be there for you, even if we live in different houses. We parted that day not just as mother and daughter, but as two grown women who had begun to understand each other better. Abril finally saw me not only as her mother, but as a person with her own desires and dreams, and I was able to accept her for who she was, with all her mistakes and flaws. Returning home, I realized that the ordeal we had gone through had ultimately brought us closer together than the years we had lived together under the same roof. Sometimes you have to distance yourself to truly see each other. 3 months have passed since I finally moved into my new apartment in the center of Belmont. Autumn has come into its own, painting the leaves in the park in bright shades of gold and crimson. My balcony offered a stunning view of this natural kaleidoscope. Every morning, with a cup of coffee in my hands, I watched the city wake up and fill with people rushing about their business. My life had taken on a new, measured rhythm. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I took photography classes where I continued to hone my skills under the guidance of Heather Oren. On weekends, I went on photo walks with Quentin and other enthusiasts. The rest of the time, I spent decorating my apartment, meeting with Vinny, reading books, and of course, spending time with my grandchildren, who now visited me regularly. After our difficult conversation and the financial help I gave Aubrey, our relationship slowly but surely began to change. My daughter, who was on the verge of losing her home and received unexpected support from me, began to see me in a different light. There was a respect in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. She no longer took me for granted, as an unchanging part of her life that she could use as she saw fit. The financial advisor I hired helped us develop a detailed plan to pay off Aubrey's debts. She stuck strictly to the budget and has already managed to significantly improve her financial situation over the past few months. Every month, she transferred a small amount to me toward the loan, not so much to pay me back as to symbolize her new sense of responsibility. As for the remaining proceeds from the sale of the house, I decided to use them as I saw fit. I invested a third of the money in reliable long-term investments on the advice of the same financial advisor. I put another third into educational accounts for Silas and Fallon, money they can use to pay for college when the time comes. I kept the last part for myself for living expenses and to fulfill some long-held desires, including the travel I had dreamed of my entire life. In early October, I returned from my first solo trip, a week-long photo tour of New England. I had never traveled alone before, without Garrett or Abrielle, and I felt a little anxious at first. But the company of 10 enthusiastic photographers, including Quentin, who organized the trip, turned out to be perfect for me. We stayed in small roadside motels, got up before dawn to capture the morning mist over the lakes, and wandered through the woods, photographing the fall foliage in all its glory. I came back from the trip with hundreds of photos and a new sense of confidence. As Heather said when she looked at my work in the next class, I had found my own style: lyrical, calm, filled with light even in the most ordinary scenes. It was then that she suggested I consider a small solo exhibition at the city library, which regularly hosted exhibitions by local photographers and artists. The idea seemed both frightening and exciting. Me, Meredith Tramble, a 67-year-old widow and former nurse, putting on my own photo exhibition? It seemed like something out of a fantasy novel. But Heather was persistent, and Quentin and other friends from the photo club were enthusiastic about the idea. "You have nothing to fear," Quentin said, as we discussed it over a cup of tea in my apartment. "You have a wonderful eye and technical skills that many who have been involved in photography for years would envy." "But I'm a beginner," I objected. "I've only been taking classes for 3 months." "Some people study their whole lives and never achieve what you do intuitively," he smiled. "And besides, an exhibition at the library isn't the Metropolitan Museum. It's a wonderful opportunity to show your work and get feedback." After much hesitation, I agreed. Heather helped me select 20 of my best photos from the past few months, and the library provided a room for the exhibition for 2 weeks in November. All that was left was to print and frame the photos, a process that turned out to be more laborious and expensive than I had anticipated, but also more enjoyable. I told Abrielle about the upcoming exhibition during one of her visits with the children. She was genuinely surprised and, to my delight, offered to help organize a small reception for the opening. "I can order appetizers and champagne," she said, "and invite a few of my colleagues. One of them is into photography and could write about the exhibition in the local newspaper." Her enthusiasm touched me deeply. This was not at all like the old Abri, who rarely took an interest in my activities and hobbies. But the new Abrielle, who had emerged after our financial crisis, seemed genuinely eager to participate in my life and support my endeavors. "That would be wonderful," I smiled. "But don't spend too much. You're still on a tight budget." "Don't worry, Mom," she winked. "I have connections at a catering company. I can get a good discount." Silas, who was present during the conversation, also showed interest. "Grandma, can I help you hang up the artwork?" he asked. "I've read a few articles on how to organize an exhibition properly." "Of course, dear," I said happily. "Your help will be invaluable." Even little Fallon wanted to contribute and offered to draw invitations for the guests. Her childish drawings of cameras and flowers were so cute that I actually used them to invite our closest friends. The opening of the exhibition was scheduled for Friday, November 15th. A week before the event, I was so excited that I could hardly sleep at night. Every day brought new worries. I had to pick up the finished prints from the photo lab, check the frames, coordinate technical details with the library, and compile a list of guests. The day before the opening, Silas and I spent the entire day at the library hanging the photographs. My grandson turned out to be a real professional at this. He carefully measured the distances between the works, selected the optimal height for each photograph, and took into account the lighting and the trajectory of visitors' movements through the hall. "You see, Grandma," he explained as he attached another photograph to the wall, "it's important to create a story that the viewer will read as they move from one picture to the next. We start with cityscapes, then move on to nature, then to more abstract compositions." I listened to him with amazement and pride. Who would have thought that my introverted grandson, who was always glued to his phone, would become so fascinated with exhibition design? At one point, I caught myself thinking that selling the house and everything that followed, despite all the difficulties, had turned out to be a blessing for our family. They allowed us to see things in each other that we hadn't noticed before. When I got home that evening, I received an unexpected call from Vinny. "Honey, I just heard some amazing news," she said excitedly. "Caroline Williams, the woman who bought your house, is pregnant. They're expecting their second child in the spring." "That's wonderful," I said, sincerely happy for them. "So there will be children's laughter in the house again." "Yes, life goes on," Vinny remarked philosophically. "By the way, I've already invited 15 people to your exhibition. Our entire book club is coming, and I told them that you're not just a talented photographer, but also a very brave woman who wasn't afraid to start a new life at an age when most people do nothing but complain about their health." I laughed. "Vinny, you're exaggerating. I'm just doing what I like." "That's exactly what courage is, my dear," my friend replied seriously. "Not everyone dares to follow their desires, especially if it means overcoming resistance from loved ones." Her words made me think. Was I really brave to sell my house and start a new life? Or was I just tired of living by other people's rules? In any case, I didn't regret my decision. Every morning I woke up with the feeling that the day would bring something interesting, new, and unknown. Isn't that the meaning of life, regardless of age? The opening day of the exhibition was clear and cool. I woke up early, put on some light makeup, slipped into a new sea green dress I had bought especially for the occasion, and left for the library 2 hours before the official start to make sure everything was ready. To my surprise, April was already there, directing a team from the catering service as they set up tables, glasses, and appetizers. "Mom," she exclaimed when she saw me, "you look amazing. Is that a new dress?" "Yes, I bought it last week," I said, twirling around to show off my outfit. "Isn't it a little too young for me?" "Not at all," she replied sincerely. "It looks perfect with your eyes. By the way, I added a few of my colleagues from the insurance company to the guest list. I hope you don't mind?" "Of course not," I smiled. "The more people who see my work, the better." By 5 o'clock in the evening, when the opening was scheduled to begin, everything was ready. Photographs in elegant frames adorned the walls of the small exhibition hall. Tables with snacks and drinks stood in the center, and a guest book lay at the entrance. Heather Oren, my teacher, had prepared a short introductory speech, and the librarian had placed a poster in the lobby with my name and the title of the exhibition, "The World Through My Lens." The first to arrive were Vinny and her friends from the book club, followed by Quentin and other photography students, then Abry's colleagues and random library visitors who were interested in what was going on. By 5:30, the hall was full of people looking at the photos, discussing photography techniques, and enjoying the snacks and wine. I was standing by one of the walls, surrounded by a small group of guests, talking about how the photo of the autumn lake in the fog was taken, when I noticed Dexter, Abry's ex-husband, and the father of my grandchildren entering the room. It was a surprise. I hadn't seen him in several years since they divorced. He had aged a little, with gray hair appearing, but he was still an attractive man. Standing next to him were Silas and Fallon, proudly showing their father the exhibition they had helped organize. "Excuse myself to my companions," I approached them. Dexter, what a surprise! I smiled, holding out my hand. Meredith, you look beautiful. He shook my hand firmly. The children were so excited about your exhibition that I just had to come. And I must say, your work is impressive. Thank you, I said, feeling myself blush at his compliment. It's just a hobby, but it brings me joy. Sometimes it's hobbies like that that make our lives complete, he remarked philosophically. By the way, I heard you sold your house and started a new life, Abri told me. That's a bold move. Not so much bold as necessary, I replied, thinking that Aubrey had probably started to interpret the events of those days differently. Sometimes you have to change something to move forward. I completely agree, Dexter nodded. After our divorce, I also decided to change my life. I moved to another city, changed jobs, and started spending more time with my children. And it was the best decision I ever made. We talked, reminiscing about the past and discussing the present. He told me that he had recently been promoted at his new company, bought a house in the suburbs, and was planning to spend weekends there with his children. I noticed how the relationship between him and Abrielle had changed. They no longer looked at each other with ill-concealed animosity as they had before, but communicated calmly, discussing issues related to the children. The evening flew by. Heather gave a warm speech about my talent and the progress I had made in such a short time. Quentin raised a toast to Belmont's new star photographer. Vinny applauded loudly and demanded that everyone sign the guest book. Abril made sure the guests' glasses were always full and there were enough snacks. But the most touching moment came when Silas suddenly stepped into the center of the room and asked for everyone's attention. I'd like to say a few words about my grandmother, he began, blushing slightly but speaking clearly and confidently. Many of you know her as Meredith Tramble, the author of these photographs. But to me, she was always just Grandma who baked the best apple pies in the world and let me stay up late watching TV when I slept over. A good-natured laugh swept through the room. But in recent months, I've seen something more in her, my grandson continued. I've seen a person who isn't afraid of change, who follows her dreams despite all the difficulties. And that inspires me. Thanks to my grandmother, I've learned that it's never too late to start something new, never too late to follow your passion. So I propose a toast to Meredith Tramble, photographer, grandmother, and the most amazing woman I know. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt a lump in my throat and tears welling up in my eyes. Silas, my quiet, reserved grandson, had just given the most touching speech I had ever heard. Abri came over and hugged me tightly. He's right, Mom. You're amazing. And I didn't realize it for so long. At that moment, I realized that all the trials we had gone through, my move, Abri's financial problems, our difficult conversations and reconciliations, were all part of the long journey we had to take to truly see and appreciate each other. After the official part was over, Abri, Dexter, the kids, and I decided to have dinner at a small restaurant near the library. Sitting at the table, surrounded by my family, I couldn't help but think about how much everything had changed in those few months. We had become closer, more sincere, and more open with each other. Each of us had found our place in this new configuration of relationships. April no longer saw me as just a mother who had to always be there to help. Now, she saw me as an independent person with my own interests and desires. I, in turn, learned to set boundaries without sacrificing my closeness to my daughter and grandchildren. Mom, Abriel said as we said goodbye at the restaurant exit, I wanted to tell you, I'm glad you sold the house. Not because you helped me financially, although I am infinitely grateful for that. It's because it helped us all change for the better. If everything had stayed the same, we would have continued living in our own little worlds, not understanding each other. I'm glad too, I replied sincerely. Sometimes it takes a big push to see what's always been right in front of you. We hugged, and I felt that the wall of misunderstanding that had existed between us was gone. We were finally just mother and daughter, loving each other for who we are, without conditions or expectations. On the taxi ride home, I thought about what Winnie had said a few months ago. Home is the walls, dear. Life is what happens here. She tapped her temple. And here, she placed her hand on her heart. How right she was. My real home was no longer within the walls of the old building on Meadowlark Lane, but in my relationships with my loved ones, in new friends, in hobbies that brought me joy, in the small victories and discoveries of each day. I entered my apartment, turned on the light, and walked over to the window. The park below was shrouded in darkness, with only the streetlights casting a soft glow on the paths and benches. Tomorrow would be a new day, with new opportunities and experiences, and I was ready to meet it with an open heart as I would every day of my new life.